Chapter 1. People of the Way. The desert road shimmered in the heat. Saul of Tarsus knew these roads. He had walked them with confidence, his steps measured, his purpose fixed. But on this day, if you had stopped him and asked about the way, his eyes would have narrowed, his jaw set. That name meant trouble. It meant heresy. It meant a movement that needed to be erased. The people who followed this way didn't fit in the scrolls he had studied since boyhood. They lacked the polish of the Sanhedrin. They didn't wear the robes, recite the pedigrees, or hold the titles. And yet they spoke with a courage that unsettled him. The council saw it too. Acts 4 tells us that when the rulers saw the courage of Peter and John and realized they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished. Ordinary, yet bold, simple, yet unshaken. The Sanhedrin held the scriptures in their hands, but somehow missed the story unfolding in their streets. They could quote Isaiah's vision of a promised king, recite the servants suffering from memory, and repeat the prophecies of a kingdom without swords. Yet their eyes searched for a crown of gold, not thorns, for a throne of stone, not a cross of wood. But the way saw him. They saw a king who knelt to wash feet, a savior who touched lepers, a redeemer whose power was not counted in armies but in mercy. This was no political campaign, no bid for earthly gain. It was an invasion of grace. Hearts were changing from the inside. Pride loosened its grip. Self-righteousness stepped aside. They traded the scales of ego for the garments of humility. And what they gained was a kingdom that could not be shaken. The message rattled the gates of tradition. The way questioned the authority of the Sanhedrin, whispered to beggars in the market, called out to widows in the shadows, and spoke hope to fishermen on the shore. The clash was inevitable. Tradition met transformation. The letter of the law collided with the spirit of grace. And in the middle of it all stood Saul, brilliant, respected, utterly convinced he was right. But conviction without light is a dangerous road. Saul's heart burned with zeal, but it was zeal without knowledge. He could quote the law, but he could not yet see the Lord. He carried the scriptures in his mind, but the truth had not reached his heart. His first world was built of discipline, achievement, and pride. It looked strong, but in reality it was fragile, a tower leaning toward collapse. What Saul didn't know was that just ahead, on a road lined with dust and destiny, God was about to bring that tower down. The sun was high when Saul neared Damascus. The road ahead curved toward the city gates, but his mind was fixed on his mission. He carried authority in his hands, letters from the high priest granting him power to arrest any who belonged to the way. In Saul's eyes, this was a road of justice, a road to preserve truth. But heaven had another name for it, a road of confrontation. Without warning, it came, a light fierce and blinding, poured from the sky. Saul's knees gave way. The road beneath him turned from a place of power to a place of surrender. Dust filled his mouth, but another sound filled his ears, a voice clear and unshakable. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? His mind scrambled. Who are you, Lord? I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. The words were heavy yet alive in that moment. The man who came to break others was himself broken. When he rose, the world had gone dark. His eyes, sharp and certain moments ago, saw nothing. the scrolls in his memory, the accolades of his past, the iron will of his pride, none of them could guide him now. He had to be led by the hand like a child. The road had shifted. Narration. Spoken word.
Go, this man is my chosen instrument, to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. Acts 9:15. And Ananias entered, placed his hands on Saul, and spoke a word that must have landed like a miracle. Brother, what a word for an enemy to hear something like scales fell from Saul's eyes. Light rushed in. But this was more than restored sight, it was new sight. He saw Jesus as Lord, grace as gift, mercy as his only hope. The proud Pharisee was gone. In his place stood a man marked by mercy. The change was so complete that even his name shifted. From Saul to Paul. From that day his life became an offering. No longer the dead sacrifice of legalism, but the living sacrifice Paul would later describe in Romans 12. Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Romans 12:1. This was not a theory for Paul. It was the road he had walked, the one where light broke through and mercy took over. Paul never forgot that road, not the heat or the dust, not the shock of the light, not the voice that knew his name. Every city he entered, every prison cell he endured, carried the memory of that moment. The day everything he thought he knew collapsed and everything he truly needed began. That's why his words in Romans 12 carry such weight. They're not polished theories, they're not the tidy conclusions of a scholar. They are the invitation of a man who has walked both roads, self-made and God-made, blind and seeing, lost and found. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. Paul knew what conformity looked like. He had worn its robes, recited its laws, enforced its boundaries. His old road was paved with pride, dressed in religion, zeal without love, law without grace. And he knew what transformation felt like, breathing mercy each morning, letting Christ direct each step, walking not towards self-approval, but in God's acceptance. Paul's call wasn't for polite adjustments or occasional nods to heaven. He urged believers to lay it all down, to step off the old road and onto the new, not because God needed their effort, but because his mercy had already reached them. Mercy changes how you travel. It rewires the mind, once locked into rigid patterns, now renewed by the Spirit's freedom. It redirects the eyes, once searching for enemies, now looking for family. It reshapes the heart, once driven by the need to be right, now fueled by the joy of being redeemed. And here's where the road bends toward us. We may never ride toward Damascus with letters of arrest in hand, but we have our own places of encounter, our own turns in the road where light breaks in and we see ourselves for what we are, and Christ for who he is. It might happen in a hospital hallway, in a kitchen at midnight, or in the quiet after a prayer you weren't sure he heard. But the choice is the same as Paul's. One road is built on self-rule, self-defense, self-worth. The other is shaped by surrender, where Christ rules, Christ defends, Christ gives worth. And you can't walk both. Paul's answer was clear. Every breath, every step, every word poured out for the one who met him in mercy. Perhaps that's the true heartbeat of the way. It's not the road to prestige, but the road of grace. Not a climb to greatness, but a bowing to the greatest. And in that bending, we rise freer than we have ever been. The light still shines, the voice still calls, and the way still waits for those willing to follow.